Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are going to be talking about the internet and selling online and the legal issues. And I'm going to do it from the context of my law firm and how we are selling online. And I want to talk a little bit about strategy because I think it helps sort of dictate the legal issues and the business issues and how all of those pieces come together. So if you'll indulge me for maybe 10 to 20 minutes, I'm going to talk high-level strategy and how that affects things. And then we'll dive into the specific legal issues. And then especially in the world of COVID today, what you want to be aware of and be careful of as you move forward or develop other relationships. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk about my experience and what I have learned as a lawyer. And I'm assuming most of you aren't lawyers here. And so the strategy that I'm going to tell you about isn't going to 100% fit yours. But what I'm trying to do is show you how we as a service industry, a service provider, we don't sell products, we sell services. What we did to think about how the internet affects my specific business and more importantly, where it's going and how we're doing things. And I want you to use that as an example to think about, well, how do you apply a strategy to your specific business? And then, we'll dive into the legal considerations and how you kind of fit that all together. So we're going to be talking a little bit of high level theory and strategy here. And I apologize if it's a little boring to you, but it really is critical. And it's really important for you to have a high level strategy for your business so you can put certain tactics around it and then tie the other pieces together. For example, who are you doing business with? What partners, vendors are you leveraging and using? How do they all come together then for sort of the legal and contracts and other pieces that are part of the puzzle that'll help you sell online and grow your business? So with that said, this is my sales curve since 2016. And it's really important in my view because it shows you back in 2016 that, we were, if we sold $500 in a month, that was exciting stuff. And it was fairly level, but you could see here just the natural growth and progression. And every client I have that is selling online has a similar curve. It moves up. But it's not something you can just do once and then walk away from it and have a perpetual money machine. You have to continue to work it and feed it and evolve it and grow with it and really treat it as an important component of your business. And when you do that, this happens. Now, what's interesting here is, when you see the fluctuations in 2016, 2017, 2018, those aren't, that big of a deal. The axes, the left axis is number of transactions, and the right axis is the revenue, the gross revenue on a month-to-month basis. And what you see is when you look at 2017, for instance, and you have a month, I don't know what month that is. I think it's April or May, where it's $35,000 in that month. It's pretty significant. And then 2 months later, it drops to about $20,000. That's a $15,000 swag within 2 months. It's kind of a big deal, depending on what kind of business you're in. But now look at 2020. When we had our biggest month ever in July of 2020. Back then, January was even bigger than July, but you look at that number and it's, I don't remember we're going to examine 2020 here a little bit more carefully. But what I'm trying to show is you have a number at about 120,000 in July, and then we're down to about $78 or $80,000 4 or 5 months after that, which is a really large swing. So it's hard to control that sometimes, especially with 2020. So let's look at 2020 a little bit more. So this is just the year 2020. And you could see these fluctuations here, but I put some sort of market issues that we think probably affected our sales. And in March, right, that's really where stuff started to hit with COVID. And we had the lowest market close in 10 years on the 12th of March. We had the New Mexico governor's work from home order issued on the 23rd of March. And we experienced a decline in sales, but it wasn't that significant. I mean, we had a decline in sales from January to February, which is just part of normal up and downs for the year. So I don't think COVID really impacted our business negatively, although everybody was confused and scared. In April, we had further restrictions, but we ended up seeing a growth in business, but not significant. So when May came around, we started getting scared, saying, well, what should we do? So we did a sales promotion, 15% discount, just for the month of May. And look what happened. June, July, our biggest month ever in July. And then sales started tapering off a little bit. And it's a pretty significant difference, I think, from 113,000 to roughly 77,000 over those 5 months. But then look what happened again from November onward. We had the national elections, we had the first vaccine administered, and we're starting to see more growth again. In this past January, again, was our largest month ever. We were at a little over 120,000. This month of February, we're going to be a little lower, but not significantly lower. So the internet, I think, is a very important component of our business. You can't deny that. I think also by looking at this shows that what has COVID done? Well, it's put everybody socially distanced. Everybody has an iPad or a tablet or a computer or a laptop from home. They're doing business from home. They're interacting from home. They're ordering products and services from home. So internet-based services has definitely expanded and grown. And if it hasn't done that for your business, I think you need to ask yourself why. Because just about every area, we're seeing growth on the internet side, not just in my industry, but almost in all industries. So what I want to show you here with this is a little bit, I'm not bragging, this is just what is going on with our sales. Remember, we are a New Mexico law firm. So the last thing I would ever think of is receiving business from anybody in another state, unless they had an issue in New Mexico. Well, our internet sales is proving that wrong in really a couple of interesting ways. I'll go into more detail in a minute. But if you look here, our top 10 states, New Mexico's number 4. And look at California. It's more than double the business that we're getting from New Mexico. So by selling online, we have not just offered a more convenient way to do business with us, we have expanded our customer base. And with lawyers, that's really dangerous, believe it or not, because we're licensed in New Mexico. We are not licensed in California. We are not licensed in Florida. We're not licensed in Texas. So it raises the question, well, what are we selling online? And it turns out, well, yes, we're lawyers, but we have other things that people are interested in and interested in interacting with us on. And so it really means that we've been able to expand who we sell to as well as what we sell. And I think every business has that opportunity. And it affects the legal issues that I'm going to be confronted with as a business when I sell online. The other interesting and very, very important thing is this graph in the upper right, where it's the pie chart, non-reoccurring revenue. That's a typical lawyer. If you come to me with a contract need or maybe a dispute, litigation, something like that, I'm going to charge you for that specific matter. And then when we're done, we're done. You don't continue to pay me. Reoccurring revenue, however, is different. That's where you continue to pay month to month, year to year for certain types of services. Well, what's happening here is we figured out there's a couple things we can do that are reoccurring. So people are willing to pay us month to month or quarterly, yearly, and it's turning out to be almost a third of the revenue that we're selling online. And that graph in the upper left kind of reflects that. The blue is the non-reoccurring, and it's funny, the colors are opposite between my pie chart and my graph on the left, but whatever. The red represents the reoccurring revenue. And it's not growing as steadily as the non-reoccurring, but it's still growing. And it's becoming a significant base of ongoing revenue for my company. And why is that important? Well, if I have a decrease in overall sales one month, I still have the reoccurring revenue that I can rely on. So that's just all quick FYIs here. But let's discuss what I have learned as somebody doing business on the internet with a weird thing you wouldn't normally sell on the internet, legal services. Well, the first thing I learned is there's other sources of revenue streams for what I do as a business, aside from my traditional or core. And I mentioned reoccurring revenue. And these aren't going to apply to you because your business is unique and different from the legal services. But it's still, I want you to think about these issues and think about what else can you do that's tangentially related to your business. For us, filing services, recording services, and it turns out convenience services. People are busy or they don't want to be overwhelmed. And if they feel like they can trust us to get things done, even though they can do them themselves, they might pay us to do that. Not everybody, but a percentage of our target audience, the people that might be willing to do business with us. And also the fact that we're, lawyers, there's other products and services that are available that we can sell and make money on. We also realized reoccurring revenue is absolutely critical to our business. Think about that for a minute. We are earning somewhere between $30,000 to $40,000 a month in reoccurring revenue. So if I get sick, as a typical lawyer, if I get sick or I go on vacation, I make no money at all. And it's very scary for us lawyers, believe it or not, because we get paid by the billable hour. And if we're not able to bill, then we make no revenue. The same issue with retirement. But reoccurring revenue changes that general model for me as a lawyer. So it's absolutely critical. Also, what's really interesting is other businesses are willing to pay a lot for reoccurring revenue. So think about this for a minute. If I'm a lawyer billing, and let's say I make $100,000 a year in billable work, how much is somebody willing to pay me for my business so I can go and retire? The answer is zero, because it's of no value unless I continue to work and provide those billable hours. But the reoccurring revenue is different. I don't need to keep billing. That reoccurring revenue continues to, sell. And therefore, you can earn anywhere from 5 to 10 times gross revenues of the reoccurring revenue. So it's an extremely valuable component of our business. And it continues to increase over time. And it's also high margin, at least our reoccurring stuff is. We also learned that, you hear about time value of money. There's a time value of content. And what does that mean? Well, any service provider, not just lawyers, right? If you're providing a service, you're a plumber, janitorial, you have expertise in what it is you do. SME stands for subject matter experts. We are content gods. And you know who loves content? Google. So the more content means more engagement, the more Google loves us. And we want Google to love us because Google will send more traffic our way. And right now, if you were to look, we have anywhere from 6 to 20 people on our website at any given time because Google loves the content that we produce. And the other, it's very similar for positive reviews and ratings. If you have positive reviews and ratings, if you had positive reviews and ratings 5 years ago, they're still valuable today because people look and they see you got 20, 50, 200 positive reviews, and that matters a lot. And we're going to talk about negative reviews a little bit later in the presentation, so stay tuned for that. The other thing is, we've learned there's different kinds of demographics. You know, I can't just take a client and say all clients are the same, right? We know intuitively that's kind of stupid and silly. But it's really important to get an understanding of the different demographics. Some people want a Cadillac. They don't care how much a lawyer is going to cost. They want the best because they're in trouble or there's some major issue and they're willing to pay the most. So the Cadillac client certainly doesn't want a Chevy client, and vice versa. And not trying to impinge on Chevy, it's a different brand. It's a lower end brand. It's considered more cost effective. And people shop like that for legal services. The other interesting thing we learned is some people want help because they don't know what to do. But they want to do it themselves. So they're hiring us for our expertise. There's other people that maybe they don't know how to do it, or maybe they do, but they're too busy or they have other things to do, so they want us to do it. And it's really interesting to me because a lot of lawyers, a lot of people don't want to give good information on the internet because they say, well, then I'm just telling them how to do it. They're not going to hire me. And my strategy has been, if they're going to figure out how to do something with a 10-minute video, then they probably don't want to hire me anyway. But because I have 10-minute videos and other information out there, it develops rapport. It develops sort of a connection with people, and they start trusting me, and they haven't even met me. They've just read and looked at the information online. And because of that, it brings in more business and more leads, and it builds over time. Finally, clients are changing. Everybody's changing. We are becoming more demanding. And you know you're doing it yourself. If you go to a website and it's slow or it's confusing or it looks weird or you can't find what you want to find, you're going to click off of it and go somewhere else. So you have to be thinking about quick turnaround, immediate gratification. Interesting for lawyers, flashback 50 years ago. Right in the 60s and 70s, people hired lawyers based on references and referrals. They wanted to meet lawyers. They cared a lot about what the lawyer looked like and their reputation. That's changing. People are willing to engage without human contact, provided it's easy and it makes sense and they understand it and it meets their needs. So it's really changing my industry a lot. The problem for me, though, is I have these other jurisdictions I told you about. We're licensed in New Mexico, not California, not Florida, definitely not England or China or the other Australia. So we have those issues we have to deal with. And then finally, you have to beware of the expert systems or AI, especially somebody like me. But all businesses are going to be impacted by that. And I want to discuss that for a few minutes. So I want to talk to you quickly about what's called the Singularity. And there's some really good books out there I would encourage you to read. And the top left one is sort of outlines a very specific chart and curve that I want to talk to you about in a minute. But all these books are really good and kind of explain the general concept. And the general concept is this. Things are happening at a faster rate. And you can kind of see this here, right? Between the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, 8,000 years. And every just amazing invention is happening faster and faster and faster. And why is that? Because we have more sophisticated tools. We are better at information sharing. We have more advanced computational systems that help us analyze more data, more sophisticated data. And so you see from the Industrial Revolution to the light bulb, 120 years. Light bulb to the moon landing, 90 years. It's getting faster. World Wide Web, 22 years. Human genome sequence, 9 years. So what you have here is a curve. And what this is time on the bottom, and on the right, computations per second. It's a logarithmic curve, meaning it's as you go up, it gets much better by significant factors of computational power. And so if you think about it, back in the 40s and 50s, we had the UNIVAC, the ENIAC. These were amazing computers. The UNIVAC 1 was the first commercial computer to help with the US Census. And it had a whopping 1 calculation per second. Now, you move over to the right and you see, like in the 2000s, we started having the Pentium 2 and the Mac. And these were really interesting, powerful computers. You know, they were processing 100,000 calculations per second, 100,000 times more powerful than the UNIVAC that was used for the US Census. And yeah, I mean, you just think about that for a minute. It's a desktop computer. You plug it into the wall. The UNIVAC took up a whole room. The power requirements was a small city. So what you have here is the computation of systems is decreasing in cost significantly, in power requirements, in size, but also greatly increasing in the computational capability of the systems, in the memory requirements, what it can save. It's just incredible. But look what's happened. They've become so powerful that we have really good speech recognition. I'll tell you, I've been an IT person, and in the 80s, we were talking about how computers will never be able to understand human beings ever because of background noise, because, you know, person A might be sick one day, or, you know, it was deemed impossible. Well, we know that's ridiculous. It's not impossible. We have Alexa and Siri and other really good systems in place. We have self-driving cars. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's incredible. We have really good facial recognition where you can put a computer looking at a crowd and it can recognize faces even behind masks and hats and sunglasses. So really powerful stuff. So what does that mean? Well, the human brain has a certain number of computations per second. It's been calculated, you know, estimated somewhere 10 to the power of 15 calculations per second. Well, if you follow this curve, that's going to happen within the next couple of years, meaning your iPhone should have the calculation capability of a human brain. Now, I'm not saying it's as smart as a human brain. I'm not saying it's going to be smarter than us, but it has the computation power of a human brain. More interesting, somewhere around 2045, that iPhone of yours will have more computation capability than all human brains combined. That needs to give you some pause for a little bit. And you're probably thinking, what the heck does this have to do with internet, you know, contracts and laws? And believe me, I'm going to get to that very shortly. But let's talk about my business for a minute. And I know this doesn't have anything to do with your business, but what I'm trying to do is give you a model that you might be able to use for your business, maybe. Or at least you can see what we did and you can build your own model that will help you then figure out where you want to take things. For my model as a lawyer, I divided the marketplace into sort of the marketplace of services, what we lawyers do, into 3 categories here. And basically you have on the bottom the simple stuff. You know, it doesn't cost a lot of money. It's easy to do, but people generally went to lawyers to do it. And an example would be LLC filings. There was no LegalZoom in the 50s and 60s and 70s. People were going to lawyers to do corporate filings, for instance, and, you know, register, you know, their filings or UCC filings or their real estate. The moderate category, a little bit more work. You know, this is, you know, creating contracts and helping resolve disputes. And then we have the really complex stuff at the top where that's where we lawyers make a lot of money. Litigation, mergers, acquisitions, going public. It requires a lot of expertise. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. And what's interesting here is, what has the internet done? it's done this to my industry. We now have what's called the unlicensed legal providers, the LegalZooms, the Rocket Lawyers. They are now occupying the bottom part of that triangle. And people are going online. They don't want a lawyer. They want to find the least cost provider to get some of these lower things done. But what's happening is as automation becomes more capable, as the computers become smarter, this blue box is moving up the triangle to the point where we lawyers are going to be occupying a very small piece up at the top, if we're lucky. Even the smart computers are going to be better than us, right? Why would you hire a lawyer that's got to go and research and charge you thousands of dollars when you can talk to an AI that can figure out the answer immediately and charge you pennies? So my industry, my legal industry, is in crisis mode. And that's okay. It's not there yet, but we know where we're going. And you need to be thinking about this as well for your business. So let's now apply that to the curve that I showed you a little bit ago. In 2000, LegalZoom opened up for the first time. A little bit prior to that, you had Hornbooks and forms companies doing things, but that was rare. But now, we're in the 2023, we're pushing up. I mean, literally, we believe that you're going to be able to find low-cost legal services to help with contracts, opinions, moderately complex issues in the next couple of years. And then when are computers going to be really capable of dealing with the real significant stuff lawyers do? And probably in the next 10 years, 15 years maximum. But this is my world as a lawyer. The question is, what is your world given your business, right? What does this mean for you? So, how is your industry or profession, market, products, services, how are they changing? What are the competitors doing? Where are your customers going? What are they asking for? What do they want? How will the smart computers, and it's not just smart computers, right? It's access to better, faster information, right? Think about, what you do and the fact that we can, have a map pop up instantly and put data on that map to help people make decisions and find businesses and competitors. How does that work for you in your business, and how is that going to affect you? And then the bigger question is how can you use the internet and online systems to broaden your customer base and or appeal to other markets? One suggestion here is define a phased approach to online sales. And I have this little graph here on the right, very simple, very high level, but at the end of the day, you need to decide what are your higher margin versus lower margin products or services, number one. And then two, what's the harder stuff versus the easier stuff? And harder and easier is going to vary depending on the kind of business you are. And for me, I define it for a lawyer as harder means more competition, right? If I have a low margin product and tons of competition, it's not really much of a priority, right? Versus I have a real high margin thing and no competition. That's important for me. And that's where I focus my energies first. But there's other components to this. It's not just where the competition is. Is it easy to do as a firm, as a lawyer, right? So if I have a high margin product, but it's really hard to do, well, I'm going to favor services that I can sell that are higher margin and real easy to do versus harder to do. So that's kind of how I view the world. And it's really something you should think about as well in terms of these components. And then what you want to do is focus on the easy, higher margin stuff first. Then you can move to the other, however you want with your business, but you really need to prioritize because it's easy to get overwhelmed and not know where to start or where to begin. The other thing is, I always recommend start now. If you're not doing it now, please do so. If you're selling products, you know about Amazon, Etsy, and eBay, but don't forget about your own website, because then you can control the traffic, you can control the brand. You don't have to share your margins with anybody. So that is, your own website is really critical there. If you're selling services, well, that's a different thing. There is, Angie's List. There are some service-based things out there that are turning out to be extremely important for some service-based industries, but I still encourage you to get your own website. And then also, you want to think about your SME, subject matter expertise, your capabilities there, and leveraging that in selling online. Also, if you're not thinking about positive reviews and rankings, you need to start that immediately. And then also a really important thing for us, and I think it's going to be for you, is where are your target market? Where's your audience? Where are they online talking about the products or services that you could produce? So for instance, legal services, people are going on to, what's the website? I'm forgetting the website now. There's a big website where everybody asks all these questions. And so we go online and answer some of those questions as lawyers, and that actually brings us business. Finally, you really need to understand this. And we're going to discuss this because now we're going to move into the legal side, the contracts, the issues, and COVID. But it's important for you to get it right, and you have to maintain control of your assets. And here's what I mean by that. When you hire contractors or vendors, I'm going to go into more specifics in a minute, but they own the copyrights of the materials they produce if you're not careful. I can't tell you how many times I get a small business calling me, and it turns out that they've sort of given over control of their media, social media accounts, their vendor accounts online, and then that vendor disappears and doesn't give them back all their passwords and account information. And I've had issues where business owners will hire a vendor or a marketing person, and that marketing person will create the business handles and profiles and all the social media accounts under their ownership, meaning our clients don't even own the social media accounts that are referencing their business. And I've had very expensive disputes dealing with stuff like that. Don't be one of those businesses. Don't let that happen to you. And then finally, you absolutely need the right terms of service, privacy, and acceptable use. Why? You're going to sell a product or service online, and then somebody says, hey, I want a warranty, or I'm upset about this, I want to sue you. Well, if you don't say, you need to sue me here in New Mexico, guess what? You're getting sued in Manhattan or Seattle or wherever the individual is located. So you want to take control of the legal relationship, and hopefully you'll never need it. But if you do, you're really going to be glad that you had something like that. So let's talk about the practical legal considerations of everything that I've just discussed. So the first one is intellectual property. We all have it, or it all affects us, especially in two really critical ways. The first one is you need to understand contractors, vendors, anybody you pay who is not a W-2 employee owns the copyrights of the materials they produce for you, unless there's a contract, and unless that contract has a work made for hire clause in that contract. So it's a very specific legal language, and you got to be really careful about it. So let's say you hire a vendor to take some pictures for you. Well, they own those pictures. They can go and resell those pictures unless you have a work made for hire clause. More importantly, we're finding businesses will hire vendors or contractors to produce websites, to produce apps or e-commerce sites for them. The problem is we've had it happen several times where you will spend a lot of money, $10, $50, $200,000 to a vendor to produce some apps for you or an e-commerce site for you. They take the money, they produce what you paid them to produce, But then they go and take that same thing and package it up and sell it to everybody in your space for a fraction of what you spent. You basically paid for their new business model. Don't do that. You want to make sure that you own the copyrights associated with anything that they produce for you. And guess what? Some vendors and contractors aren't going to want that. And you know what? Move on. There's other contractors you can hire to help you with your business that where you can own the copyrights of whatever it is they produce. The other big issue we're seeing is where the contractor or vendor or employee, anybody, will build something for you, but they will incorporate the work product of others. And an example of this is pictures online. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, well, I Googled and I found these pictures on Google and I use those. No, don't do that. You have no rights to use anybody's picture without an appropriate license. So we use Shutter. There's a number of good organizations actually, and I can't really list them here because I don't want to favor one over another one. Talk to the SBDC folks and they can give you some good recommendations. But there are really good websites out there. For a small fee, you can do different packages where you get 5 or 10 images a month, or you can buy them per image, but you really want to do that. Otherwise, I promise you, there's search engines where lawyers can drag and drop their pictures into a search engine and find who is using those pictures out on the internet. And you will get demand letters. And just so you're aware, if they submitted the image to a copyright, it will enable them to go after you for $75,000 per infringing use for what's called statutory damages, plus attorney's fees. So it's an extremely expensive problem if you do something like that. So don't do it. The other issue with IP is trademarks and branding. And I got to tell you, every business, they fall in love with a name and they just run and do it. You really need to do the research to make sure that you're not going to infringe on somebody else's trademark. Otherwise, you can run into an expensive infringement suit. And then finally, I had mentioned before, control access to critical relationships like social media accounts. Do not hire somebody and let them open up those accounts for you. You may not understand it. It may be confusing for you, but force yourself to say, look, you're going to open it for me. Show me what to do, but it's going to be my account and I will give you access to it while you're working for me. That's what you need to do. I mentioned the terms of service, privacy policy, acceptable use. That's really important. You need to be thinking about it. The critical clauses, they absolutely have to be in there, include limited warranty. Otherwise, there are things called implied warranties. So you want to disclaim the implied warranties and specify what you are warranting. You have to do that. Otherwise, you can run into problems with the products or services you produce if people have an issue. You also want to limit your liability. You may have licensing issues. You definitely want, a refund and return policy specified. You want to specify jurisdiction and choice of law, meaning if I was going to sue you and you had a terms of service in there saying you can only be sued in the county of Sandoval, New Mexico, well, that means I can't file a lawsuit in Bernalillo, for instance, or it means the guy in Manhattan or Miami isn't going to be able to sue you in those jurisdictions. They have to come here to New Mexico. And that really reduces lawsuits. People don't want to have to hire a lawyer in another state. They just don't. The other thing you really want to consider is attorney's fees. And now that isn't because I'm saying, oh, you got to pay for us lawyers. It's because if you have an attorney's fees clause in there, then people can't just yank your chain. Because if they're going to try and yank your chain, then they're doing it at their risk. Because when you hire a lawyer to defend yourself and you win, they have to pay you those attorney's fees. And so it really helps people being honest and prevents people from filing frivolous lawsuits or having their cousin Vinny, who happens to be a lawyer, causing trouble for you. Finally, stay ahead of legal problems. I cannot emphasize this enough. And one issue is with the negative reviews. And let me talk about that briefly. If I had $1 for every call I had saying they had a negative review, negative reviews, you need to know this. People are entitled to their opinion. So if they think you're, a horrible plumber, they're entitled to that opinion, as bad as that opinion is. If they say you've stolen from me, and that's false, now that is actionable. The other one is if somebody does business with you, they didn't like it, they give you a negative review, they're entitled to do that. But if they go and then get their family to also give you negative reviews, well, now we've gone too far. Can't do that because Joe, who's the brother, did not do business with you. Therefore, they cannot give you a negative review based on an experience that never happened. Now, if they said, I've heard he's bad, so I'm giving them a negative review, well, then they can do that too. There's not much you can do about it. So when you do get a negative review, you want to really consider, is it, opinion or is it fact, even if you disagree with the opinion, and, did they actually do business with you or not? So depending on those answers, we'll answer whether you want to take legal action. Almost 99% of the time, it's not worth it. And instead, what you want to do is respond to it. But you don't want to respond to that individual. You want to respond to the internet at large. So you want to think about what that means. And that means getting the emotions out, apologizing for the experience. Please call us. We'd love to remedy your situation. This is, not a normal thing. We're sorry that you've experienced this. You just got to do it, even if it's hard to do, but you need to do that. Also, the other thing is the best way to, get rid of negative reviews is just kind of bury it with positive reviews. So encourage your clients or customers to leave you positive reviews to the point that it's possible. You don't want to pay for them for sure. You want to be above board with everything. Finally, know the terms and conditions of the seller markets, Amazon, merchant accounts, PayPal, credit cards. I'll give you an example. The credit card companies do not allow you to charge a surcharge because they're paying with a credit card. You do that, and if they find out, they're going to shut you off without any warning or notice. And then that's going to leave you scrambling. So you want to be careful and make sure you understand what your responsibilities are. And then the other thing that I'm finding is because we've grown so fast and we're so large, I don't have the time and ability to be answering the phone all the time. So I've had to find some competent people that can answer the phones and answer questions and resolve problems. And you're going to have the same issue as well. Finally, let's talk about the COVID issues, because these are really a big deal and it's affecting a lot of businesses. The first one is the force majeure clause. And you want to think of it from the perspective of both your clients and customers versus your vendors, contractors, landlords, and so on. And you need specific language for pandemics, if you can get it in there. And you really need to think about the issues. So for example, do you want to terminate or do you want to delay performance, right? Those are two very different things. And you think about COVID, we started having restrictions on non-essential businesses almost a year ago. I mean, just think about that for a minute. So for a whole year, you might be subject to a force majeure clause that says performance is delayed. And that means maybe you signed a contract with a vendor to do something for you. And that contractor or vendor is not doing something because of COVID, but you can find somebody that can do it for whatever reason, even though the other one isn't. So instead of delaying, you might like the ability to terminate. So you really need to think through those issues and really create what I call edge cases. If the pandemic lasts 2 weeks, well, I think delay is appropriate, not termination. But now if we talk about 2 months or a year, that's a very different thing. And maybe you do need to be able to terminate. But you need to think through those issues and make sure they are in the force majeure clause. The other thing that we're seeing a big issue for people relates to the shifting rules around performance and delivery. And what I mean by that is at the national, international, state, and even local levels, they'll, close non-essential businesses. They will even, close borders or force different quarantine requirements. And if you're a business that needs to send somebody somewhere, that's a big deal. And so you need to think about how that affects your business and how you're going to deal with that from a contract and relationship perspective with your customers and your vendors and so on. It's a big deal, and you really need to think through those issues. And now remember that there's other businesses, the non-essential folks especially, they can only operate in a limited capacity. And so that's going to be an issue for you, for your customers, number one. But then also you have issues with those vendors, and they may have in-house employee issues. So you have to think about how you can service and help the non-essential businesses. And, the one opportunity here that I would say is how can you help a non-essential business? Non-essential businesses, they're desperate. So they're looking for flexible payment terms. If you have lower end or less costly options available, that's a great way to develop a good, strong relationship with them, because they will come back. But I promise you, their loyalty is going to go to those businesses that are flexible with them and help them through this period of time. So by selling online and giving them, solutions that might help them now, and you're going to reap significant rewards from that. But your contract and legal issues, you need to be thinking about all of those, and your standard template or contract might need to be changed because of these specific issues. So we are at about 8 minutes, and I want to open up to Q&A and see if anybody has any questions for me.
Hi, Mr. Donahue. Nothing in the Q&A quite yet. Let me check the chat.
I have a question.
You go ahead, Leslie.
Thank you. I wrote some notes, but you were talking about the images and the pictures, and I think a lot of people address that. But I heard the other day someone was talking about music and the songs and the stuff. Is that kind of along the same lines if you're going to be using music? I know they were talking about some subscription services in their business, but moving it online, that kind of thing. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, music is the absolute same question regarding images. It is a copyrighted work, and you are not entitled to use any sounds or music or anything without the permission of the copyright holder. So there are websites out there for music and audio and images, just like there are for, I'm sorry, I said images. There's a lot of websites out there for songs and music and audio, like there are for images. And I want to warn you, for anybody with a retail store, you have the same problem. Do not use Pandora or Apple Music and pipe in that audio into your store. We have had businesses getting sued because of that. So there are services out there that businesses can license to do that sort of thing, and you need to use those licensing services for audio and music and so on. Absolutely.
We also have a revisit on page 14, and I'm not sure what page 14 is referring to.
This is page 14.
So I have allowed Hoda to speak. So Hoda, would you ask your question?
When on page 14, we were saying that there are big websites where people can go and ask questions and they can get answers. What are these websites?
Yeah, I have to be careful because I don't want to portray that the SBDC is sponsoring any particular website. But they're so I don't know, Leslie, can I mention some of them, or should they go to you guys to get a list? What's the right way to handle that?
Yeah, I'm turning that over to Chris. He's there. And,
Yeah, I'm here. You could, if as long as you say three. So three is the look. I always have to. Whenever I mention attorneys, I always say you could visit your attorney, you could go to LegalZoom, or you could go to NOLO. So as long as you mention three, it's okay.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And I did mention LegalZoom, not a lawyer, but they're competitors of mine. So I'm struggling to come up with the name of the one big question and answer site. But I'll throw a couple at you. AVO is a specific one for legal issues that I use, and it's probably not going to be relevant to whatever it is you're doing. More generally, though, you heard about the political discourse going on, and kind of the right wing versus left wing and where they go? There's a website that I'm struggling to come up with a name right now.
you can always send me the information, and they can contact me, and I can pass it along to them. Definitely.
I'll do that. There's at least 2 or 3, and I'm struggling for each one of them. I'm embarrassed. I don't know why I can't think of them right now.
Oh, I do the same thing, Larry. Each time I'm put on, each time I have to think of, and we'll come back to that one. Thank you, Hoda. I'm going to take away your ability to talk, and if you want to speak instead of typing your question in, please raise your hand, and I'll get to you in the correct order.
Thank you.
I know we have some other questions coming in, so we want to make sure we get them answered. But we have one: what liability does a business have if someone gets COVID as a result of going to that business? Whew, that is that's a big one.
It's a huge one, and that's a great question, Polly. The answer is it depends. People hate when Larry the lawyer says it depends, but there's a lot of discussion going on at the federal level about creating more of a legal framework for protections on lawsuits regarding COVID. But there's really nothing today that's going to protect the business from a lawsuit regarding getting COVID in the business environment. But here's what I'll tell you. You have to look at the legal theory. There is no legal statute that says COVID in it. If you get COVID, you're in trouble. What you would look to are the negligence statutes, for example. Is your business negligent in how it was handling itself, not following CDC guidelines, ignoring governor's orders? You do that, you're going to be negligent or grossly negligent, and you're probably going to be liable for anybody getting infected in your business. If you're following all the right procedures, then you're not negligent. And so therefore, it's going to be much harder to hold your business accountable. With all of that said, you should call your insurance provider if you have a general liability. If you don't have a general liability policy, shame on you. You have to have one. So assuming you have one, you need to call up your insurance company and ask them as well what riders they have relating to this. And the big issue is you want to make sure that the insurance company is going to pay for your defense, because you don't want to have to pay me a $10,000 retainer to defend you just to, prove to a judge and jury that you're not negligent. You've been doing what you are supposed to be doing. I know that's really not a specific answer, but that's the best I can do at the moment.
No, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Let's do that. I had a question earlier from Art. He asked, are we going to receive a copy of the presentation? Leslie, do we send out a copy of the slideshows to the attendees?
Yes, I will send out a copy of the slideshow. And I know we had another question in, but we are running over. I don't know if we have time to get to the other question. I'm just going to have Larry look at it just real quickly and see if he can do that. That seems like a very lot of information you might have to put in. So we may not be able to get to that one.
Yeah, the presentation will be available. The tax issues are very complicated. The state of New Mexico, with its outdated New Mexico gross receipts tax system, is not making it easy for us businesses. So it's really a whole nother topic. I apologize. There's no way we'd be able to address it all in this call. I'm sorry.
Well, we're going to have you at some other webinars too. So hopefully we will get into this. And I think we are done for today. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And again, sign up for the webinars at New Mexico Small Business Development Center.org for all our future trainings. And we will also send the COVID-19 business resources slide with the slideshow that we send to everyone.